I want everybody to take a long, hard look at this quote above me. Yeah, there it is. And when I was preparing to come to a cybersecurity conference, when they asked a jazz pianist to speak here, I said, I better do some research about cybersecurity. And this is what I came up with. To be completely candid, I have no idea what this means. But thankfully, you all have a good handle on what to do to help this not happen, because it sounds pretty bad. So thank you on behalf of all the lay people in the world. And thank you also for having me here today. My name is Emmett Cohen, and I was extremely fortunate to have found my calling at age 3. After my helicopter father took me to the piano and found out that I could hear classical melodies and play them back on the piano. And it wasn't until about age 13 or 14 when I really discovered my passion for jazz. And there was a few things about jazz that really drew me. It was the improvisation. It was the celebration of individuality, the mythology of the characters that made the music what it was. It was the creativity and the feeling of swing and the blues that really drew me the most. And since then, I've gone on to earn a few degrees from university, but I won't bore you with that, and that's actually not where I learned my most important lessons. You know, jazz relies on execution. It's experiential. And I think what you all do is experiential as well. It's hands-on, you're mining for data, analyzing it, working in teams, connecting with people all over the world and trying to predict the future, which is something we try to do as jazz musicians as well. And today I'm going to provide a few observations and reflections from a lifetime in jazz, albeit a short lifetime in jazz, that hopefully you'll find are relatable. So, firstly, I want to know, has anyone heard of the American pianist and composer George Gershwin? Okay, a few people. That's right. George Gershwin, he wrote the theme song for United Airlines. I thought we might have some frequent flyers in here. But seriously, that song is called Rhapsody in Blue. And he wrote it in 1924. And about 6 years later, he wrote a song called I Got Rhythm. And I'm going to perform that for you now. So George Gershwin was quoted saying, "Life is a lot like jazz. It's best when you improvise." And it makes me think about humans and animals. We improvise each day to find food. We improvise to get the things we need to do done, in whatever fashion they may be. And we improvise especially when communicating with one another. And there are cues, rules, norms, expectations, like there are in any language here on earth. Similarly, there are in music as well. And I'm going to give you an example. Let's try it one more time. Okay. So that musical cue is ingrained so deeply in your subconscious, and most of you aren't even musicians, right? So when we improvise, when we play music, there's all sorts of little things like that that help connect us to each other. And I'm not here with a band today, but usually I play with other musicians. And so we'll be having a conversation with each other and with the audience on stage. Now, I need a volunteer. Sure. Come up. So, what's your name?
My name's Tim Flynn.
Tim, nice to meet you, Tim. And what's your job?
I'm a business development rep here at Cyber Reason.
Business development. And how do you like your job?
Love it. It's fast-paced.
Okay. Me too. We have that in common. So what I'm going to ask you to do, Tim, is I'm going to ask you to give me 2 emotions. It can be any emotions you can think of. And I'm going to take them to the piano and improvise freely using no other constraints other than those 2 emotions.
All right, I'm going to go with happy and scared.
Happy and scared. Okay. Thanks, Tim. So I just played exactly what those emotions felt to me in the moment. And that leads me to my first important takeaway today. It's my first time with the clicker. Improvisation means to say yes. So whatever the circumstances, you accept them. Whatever happens, you accept the circumstances and you continue to the best of your ability and the best of your creativity and continually see that pathway forward. And jazz is an unplanned, unpredictable world similar to cybersecurity, I would imagine. And it's really important to be able to just see that there is going to be some alternate way or alternate venue or vehicle for doing something. And problem solving is important as well. But there's not always time to problem solve. So imagine if I took a couple hours to come up with what I was going to do there, then we would be here all day. But I think it's really important to just consider that improvisational aspect. And your imagination may be narrowed with problem solving, and the interpretive possibilities of action could even be diminished. So Miles Davis used to always tell his band, there's no such thing as a mistake. There's just an opportunity for something new and creative to emerge. And I think that improvisation really, it lends itself to the mindset to say yes and just jump in and continually see that there will be something new, creative, and interesting emerge if you put the time and the effort in. So let's give our volunteer a round of applause. Thanks, Tim. So over the last 3 years, I have a personal artistic project that I've conceived, and it's entitled the Master's Legacy Series. And what the goal of it is to pair 80 and 90-year-old jazz musicians, jazz legends, with 20 and 30-year-old serious jazz musicians. And what the focus is on the intergenerational transference of knowledge between the old and the young. And I've gotten a chance to be around some of the great jazz musicians still alive in their 80s and 90s, names like Ron Carter or Benny Golson or even Jimmy Heath. And these people are guys who shared the bandstand and traveled the world with Dizzy Gillespie, Miles Davis, John Coltrane, Charlie Parker, Thelonious Monk, these names that maybe you've heard in passing somewhere on the radio, the real American icons. And through getting to be around these musicians, I've understood that they all have their individual conceptions, and they all have their unique mindsets about how music and life should intersect. And so what I've really taken away from that is that they're all uniquely individual. And that leads me to ask the question, what does it mean to be an individual in the music? And I think when we first start playing, we learn by imitating the ones who we look up to. We learn by imitating the ones who are successful. Jazz musicians always strive to look for that innovation and find the ones who innovated in their time period, figure out what it is they did, and so we can take that information and use it in our time period to move forward. So my goal is not to sound like any of those names that I mentioned or any of my piano heroes, but my goal is really to interpret all of their teachings and all of their music and lessons and let it embody what I do and help me become the best version of myself. And so I wanted to give you a little sneak preview of, or an inside look, if you will, into the imitation process in jazz. All jazz musicians go through this, and it's called transcription. And so jazz musicians pour hours and hours over recorded music and try to figure out the exact notes that the masters played and the exact rhythms and how the interaction between the instruments works. So I'm going to play for you. We can cue the track. Yeah. Okay, that's out of battery. Hey, Bo, we can play the audio if it's ready. So what you heard there was the piano stylings of Thelonious Monk. And Thelonious Monk was an American icon. They called him the high priest of bebop, or the architect of modern music. And Thelonious Monk, he was an original, he was an individual and an eccentric. And sometimes he would get up while the band was playing and dance around and feel good. People would see that and be like, okay, that's what jazz is about. Other times he would play with his arms or his wrists to slam into the keyboard for added punctuation. And he wrote some of the most unique music of the 20th century. And it was interesting that Thelonious Monk, he never got the recognition he deserved in his lifetime. And it wasn't until about 40 or 45 when he did get that, but he was playing the same way he had always been playing. And so at 19 even, it's a good example, he wrote a piece of music called Round Midnight. And this piece of music would go on to become the most recorded piece of music in jazz history, and it still is. I'm going to perform for you now Thelonious Monks' Round Midnight. Felonious Monks, Round Midnight. So Thelonious Monk, he was quoted saying, "A genius is the one most like himself." Genius is the one most like himself. And I think if Thelonious Monk were alive in 2018, he would say, a genius is the one most like himself or herself. And think back to when you were in elementary school or middle school and you had braces, maybe in a backpack, and you were walking through the hallways, and there was enormous pressure to fit in with the people you're around, to conform to the norms. It mattered what kind of shoes you wore, what kind of hairstyle you had, and if you were different in any way, you would be made fun of. And there's nothing worse than being made fun of. And I think the culture of that, it kind of continues on, whether we know it or not, at least in regards to how we act through the workforce and anywhere. And I think I want you to contrast that with the teachings of jazz, where you're celebrated for being an individual, you're celebrated for being different. If I go down to a jazz club in New York City at 3 a.m. any day of the week, there's dozens of students, 18, 19, 20 years old, trying to cut their teeth, trying to become the best versions of themselves. And I think that's something we can take into our everyday lives and realize that it's okay to be ourselves. And if we accept our strengths and weaknesses and our abilities, then we'll be able to make a team or a group of people more successful. And if you're the one in power, I'm not asking you to come into work at 11 a.m. and leave at 2 and make your own rules and get yourself fired. But, but what I am asking you to do is to just tolerate that little bit of individuality and support it, because it can go a long way. So the lesson from all that is be undeniably you. And so we talked about individuality, we talked about creativity, improvisation, and the importance of apprenticeship. But there's that X factor. I mentioned earlier, jazz relies on execution. You can have all the thoughts, all the information in the world, and not be able to translate it to the music. And I'm often asked, what do you think about when you play? What do you think about when you're improvising? And that's must be different for everyone. But for me, it's to really connect with that higher state of consciousness, higher place of awareness, similar to if you meditate, connecting with your breath. When you drive, you can drive out your thoughts by connecting with your breath and finding that place where you meditate. Or if you're not a meditator, then maybe going down a mountain 100 miles per hour in your favorite roller coaster. What do you have time to think about when you're on a roller coaster? Nothing really. It's all adrenaline, it's all instincts. And that's something that we have a lot of in music too. Adrenaline and instincts, they really kick in. So I think there was one guy who summed it up best. His name was Charlie Parker. And he said, master your instrument, master the music, then forget all that and just play. And Charlie Parker, he was an amazing alto saxophone player and had two specific traits that were blended together to make him so special. One was his virtuosity, his connection to his mind. He could play things faster and louder and crisper and cleaner than anyone who came before him. And then there's the other side of him, which is that ability to connect with the emotional aspect of music. And Charlie Parker, he was able to play the sounds of sorrow, the sounds of despair, thoughtfulness, love, mystery, and especially happiness, joy, and hope, and be able to uplift a group of people, uplift their spirits. And we call that connection to the emotion playing the blues, and the ability to play the blues. And it's almost something you can't describe in words, but if you think of any of your favorite blues musicians, Aretha Franklin, Eric Clapton, Buddy Guy, B.B. King, then you know what I'm talking about. So I think the best way to sum this up is to play a piece of music, that's not yet, a piece of music by Charlie Parker entitled Now's the Time. This is a blues by Charlie Parker. So that was the blues. If the preparation is there, if the foundation is there, then there's only one piece of the puzzle that's missing, the last little ingredient, and that is to find the love in what you do. If you love what you do, if you love who you work with, or you even love the fact that you can keep millions of people safe in a dangerous cyber world, then if you feel that really honestly, it will enhance your life. It will give you meaning for what you do. So I hope you all will consider the compositions of George Gershwin. I hope you'll think about the bluesy melodies of Charlie Parker and go back and check out Felonious Monks' unique piano style and really feel the love they have for what they're doing. And that's what makes it so special. And if you take the time to share this music with someone you love or care about, or take the time to just connect with it personally, it can enhance your life in ways you never imagined. Thank you very much. I'm Emmett Cohen.